Welcome, everybody, to Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here, as always, with Howard Teibel.
And his most favorite coffee, Pete's Coffee.
Hey!
You know, I should be doing an ad for Pete's Coffee.
You should.
Pete's Coffee. Much better than beep.
I love it. And if people knew what a road warrior you were, that you're doing it with Pete's Coffee in your car. Can I say that?
You didn't say that. Oh, you did reveal that, didn't you?
I did. I love that.
Yeah, I'm doing it in my car.
And you sound great.
We had a time to do this, Pete. I was in between meetings. I couldn't get back. The traffic was horrible. I am parked in the shade with my Pete's Coffee. Let's do the podcast.
Yeah, I love it. We are talking about shared services today, getting started with shared services. But before we dig into that, make sure you head over to the website, teibelinc.com, and there you can find everything you'd ever possibly want to know about Teibel Inc. and this show. You can subscribe to the show for free. You can listen to it right there on the web. You can sign up to our email list and make sure that you get each episode every week as soon as it goes live. Be the first to know. And, of course, links to everywhere you can share your thoughts and get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. So, all the old business out of the way, Howard, why is it important for us to be talking about shared services right now and moving into a shared services model?
That's a really, it's interesting. I've been in this conversation around shared services and helped implement shared services at a number of different schools, probably between 5 and 8 years ago. And that's
just when you started hearing about it, right? Is that or was that like a crest of a wave?
No, it's been around a lot longer than that. I mean, the kind of shared services that have made its way to most institutions or to many institutions is the idea of the student-facing kind of model where you bring together the student support services, the financial aid office, the bursar's office, and you provide this concept of one-stop shopping. So that's the client or the student-facing kind of service model. The service models that take more thought, more buy-in, more involvement are more of the back office type of functions. So I think it might be useful, Pete, to just start with a definition of what we're talking about here.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm just gonna read this because having written this and grab this from different sources too. The term shared services refers to a streamlining process where administrative tasks or technology management services that regularly occurred across several departments in the organization are placed under the authority of one unit. For example, instead of each department handling human services functions for its own employees, an institution or system-wide human resources office is created. And what this does, and by the way, that's one example. If you think about different levels of shared services, there would be the basic functionality. And those would be things like facilities, HR, IT, communication, audit, compliance and risk management, institutional effectiveness. The basic concept is, and I think that in many ways this is in response to that how most higher ed has evolved is as a very decentralized kind of management function, series of functions to get the work done that are supporting the teaching and research. And in the decentralization, what we have done is we have put people in positions to be doing things that they do infrequently, but we've got somebody outside of everyone's office doing things the same way. And where this actually began to shift and it got some momentum was, in the 90s, a lot of institutions went through the ERP or the PeopleSoft Oracle enterprise-wide system implementation.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And then when they did this, part of what these large consulting firms, Oracle and PeopleSoft, sold them is this idea of self-service. That we can give you the ability to have everybody sitting in their own individual department or individual office and be able to upload all of their data, whether it is their purchasing or whether it's their accounts payable information or whether it's their travel information. Sounds great. But the implementation of it played out that the systems were not as easy, and actually they were difficult and kludgy. And because of the infrequency of doing these tasks, most people don't get comfortable with it. So
and I remember, I mean, it would require training and retraining and retraining and retraining.
Yeah. And there's really, in some ways, no going back. The systems that people are using at their desktop is not going away. However, institutions are recognizing, because they're seeing lots of examples of their peers doing this, of taking a function like financial functions, accounts payable, procurement, and bringing this into a shared body that would then inherit the work of individual units. And what would happen, if you just think about the simplicity of this, that shared unit, or that unit that operates as a shared service model, allows these individuals to be doing this work more frequently. They develop competencies. They become the experts. So in theory, I think nobody would argue with the concept. In practice, it's in some cases very hard to do. So this is what we're talking about, is bringing together functions that are happening across a system, whether it's across an academic area or an IT function that's happening across the school, and saying, let's create a central body that can serve in a shared support function to multiple units.
Okay.
All right. So that's the model.
That's the model. I imagine, I already have some fears and concerns percolating up in the back of my mind. So I'm hoping you can walk through some of the benefits. Yeah. I'm faculty, right? I mean,
you get to play faculty right now.
Yeah.
All right. Give it to me. Give it to me.
No. I want you to sell me more of these sort of the benefits. We know the model, but I understand sort of the streamlining of, and the way you've put it, it seems like sort of low hanging fruit, right? Centralizing administrative resources, centralizing financial resources that departmentally, I recognize the idea is that we may have more bandwidth if we put all these functions together and can actually accomplish more.
First, what I want to know, Pete, is what kind of faculty member are you? Are you one of these faculty members that really wants to collaborate with the administrative side of the house? Are you somewhere in the middle, or are you just playing me lip service? Tell the truth.
You lip service? I do that every day. I mean, wait a minute. I think that I want to say both things.
I want you to do this. Represent them all.
Well, I'm going to represent one that I personally really like having the administrative resource that I have at my disposal, who takes care of all of my problems, all of my challenges. It's always right there. And I worry that if I lost that administrative resource or had to now go into some sort of a shared services model, that I wouldn't get the same sort of, I'm going to say it out loud here, love and care.
Love and care is exactly the right word to describe it. And by the way, I think administrators very much minimize the value and importance of that kind of, you open your door and there's the person that there's to support you and they can do everything. I think if we're honest about it, though, the person that's sitting outside our door has not been given sufficient training, and probably will never be given sufficient training, to do a really great job at the level of complex kind of HR, IT, financial work. And I'm not saying this is true across the board, but this is not about replacing that person. This is about providing additional support to that person. And I think the rightful fear is that what we're putting in place here is, I'm going to lose my person, and I now have to deal with this voice on the other end of the phone that doesn't understand my nuance. So the implementations that I have seen gone very well helped faculty understand that this is about, first of all, you can't go into this with the answer. You got to go into this as an exploration, and you need faculty on the team to help evaluate what should we be sharing, right? We have to start with, why even bother doing this? Well, and again, for some faculty, and even I'd say more faculty than administrators, efficiency is not their number one concerns. But that is an administrator concern, and I think we have to appreciate both sides. Administrators have to appreciate the importance of faculty having good support on site, and faculty need to appreciate the importance of efficiency across divisions.
Here's the thing. No, I've got it for you. I figured it out. I use the words love and care, but I think I think that may be also hiding the true intention here. Administrators certainly need to, faculty need to understand the need to support, be supported. What faculty really want is that sort of, I'm going to make some people angry, is attention.
What do you mean?
I mean, there is a part of me when I step into the classroom that wants to feel like I have a team of people who are aware of my needs before I have them. And they give me that constant attention. Not support.
Well, that's right.
This is not support. This is a I am the star kind of, I'm making things happen in the classroom. Now, I'm not saying that's valid or real or necessarily much of a team player approach, but I also think that feeds into the fear. Am I going to get the same personal attention when I lose that resource?
So what's interesting about that is I would say that there may be first of all, put aside, the being the star, and I think there's a lot of value. I know that I want someone to anticipate my needs. I think that is a very valid desire, especially if you are the one that is the forward-facing, central to the mission, teaching and research. I think you have every right to want to get as much support so you can do a phenomenal job in your work. Now, the other side of that is the reality of the constraints about not having enough resources or not being able to hire the kind of resources across a large institution where we've got finance experts sitting at every desk and we've got HR experts sitting at every desk. So it's insufficient, in my experience, that we just rely on the HR department and somehow they will figure out how to work with my people sufficiently, or the finance department. We need these, in a sense, liaisons, and that's what these roles are. This is about creating greater consistency in work practices. It is about streamlining processes. I know I'm speaking to the choir if there are administrators listening to this, but I also know if there are faculty listening to this, they're thinking, I don't really care as much about that. All I can say if that is out there, and I don't think it's as out there as we claim. I think administrators can exaggerate faculty resistance. I think faculty want to understand what you're doing and be able to weigh in on what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely okay.
But I'm going to add one more thing here.
Yeah,
there's a need for greater data accuracy. If these institutions are going to be able to purchase and pay and understand how their cost structure really works, make sure that their IT systems are running fluidly. We need better data. And I can tell you that if you have somebody outside your office doing all of these technical tasks across an institution, it is a chronic problem about the inaccuracies, and then the back office is often finding themselves correcting. Now, the answer might be, and in some cases is, training. What we're talking about here is in some cases taking incremental steps. So let's just talk for a minute about because I could list off a whole series of other benefits. I think if you're sitting in the office, the question you would be asking is, what's the benefit to me? Right?
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and this is what I was going to say just before you say that. It's this idea that as a faculty member, I think you nailed it, right? Is that I don't care necessarily about all of the sort of administrative machinations that need to go on to make this happen. What I care about is that you understand, administrator, the thing that I fear I'm losing. And that you have a place to provide me the same level of service or better to help make this transition easier.
Here's the problem.
Change is one thing, but I need to know that I'm going to have some service.
Yeah, but you just use some language there that I think is a lightning rod, or where we set ourselves up for failure.
Oh, good. Tell me.
I want the same level or better service. If I give you different service, I'm telling you out of the gate, you're not going to interpret that as the same level. So out of the gate, we have to be willing to suspend some disbelief and trust, as long as our administrators are including us, trust those who are implementing these kinds of changes, that they're taking these things into account. And I can tell you, if you're leading a project and if you're not involving those who you're affecting in that kind of way, you are going to make it more likely that even if you put this in place, the reaction from people is going to be, I don't like it because you changed it, and the fact that you changed it, it's not better. So the only way you're going to build trust and get people to look at it out of the gate is saying, we're doing it differently. I know this is going to be different and in some cases harder, and we're going to have a mechanism for dealing with some of those breakdowns in the transition. Now, when you think about implementing something like this, the classic challenge is, where do you start? Do you start with the places that have the greatest need? Do you start with the places that actually have the greatest receptivity? And I would say that the way to think about this is, start where you can demonstrate some success and get some positive buy-in from those who have made the transition, because that in itself becomes the seeds to go to a more complex department, for example, or a series of departments, and saying, we'd like to put this in here. And that's what a lot of schools are doing. They start with a group or series of groups, and they pilot it. And then what they do is they expand on those successes. They learn from it and they expand on it. So, in a few minutes, I'll tell you sort of the way to get this thing started. But fundamentally, I think where we need to pay attention is the dialogue we have been having, which is, how do we engage those who are affecting in a way that they know they're taking us into account, but you then have to tell the truth. You can't make promises you can't keep, or you're not certain you can keep. And that's where these projects sometimes go off the rails, is with the intent to sell it, to win people over, to get these systems in. We exaggerate the benefit. And I can tell you, it may be very difficult to get a particular department head or someone in a series of departments to be convinced before you do it, this is going to be good for them. I think you need to do a better job of saying, you know what, I understand why this is going to be hard. Let's understand what you do want to have your people retain, and what you're willing to give up. I can tell you that one of the benefits of this is you free up. And again, you can't think on day one. 6 months to a year down the road, 6 months, let's say 6 months.
Okay.
You free up the person who has been doing these tasks that cannot do them very well because they're not being trained sufficiently, or the systems are kludgy, or combination. It frees up them to be doing more high-level or different work. And I can tell you that when I've been part of these, part of the conversation that has to happen is, all right, let's think about how you'd like to use the person sitting outside your office in a more strategic or tactical way that would benefit your work. So it forces them to step back and to not just keep doing it the way they've always doing it, but to say, you know what, I can now give this person some work that I don't have a resource for, but now that they have more free time because they're not doing all of those complex tasks, they can take on these other things. So that is probably one of the more tangible benefits. Is it opens the door for a different way of working with the person who is there to support you.
Well, and I think that gets to a secondary fear, right? Which is, if you're going to a shared services model, does streamlining equal downsizing? And
That's right.
I imagine those things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. I mean,
okay. So you I think you hit it on the head, which is, what if I have a person sitting outside my office that I know beyond the stuff that they're doing, there really isn't other work for them to be doing? Am I at risk if I embrace this of saying that my person now has, a 50% workload? What do I do about that? And what I can say, all I can say to you and anyone in response to that is, you can either look at the negative or you can say, what is the opportunity? And if we think about the opportunity more about the whole versus the individual, the opportunity could be is that this person then takes on and supports maybe another person. Maybe you have a resource that you can now share among multiple people. And this is not budget cutting. This is about finding ways to have the right people focusing on the right tasks so that the work can get done well. And we're either going to keep investing in more and more training that I can tell you often doesn't produce the outcome, and upgrading and then buying into the idea these systems are going to get simpler to use. But there's no getting around the fact is that we're not going to have administrators outside our office for the most part who are going to be experts. And this is a way to offset them not having to be experts. Okay.
I hear you. And I think you to step back just a few minutes when you told me that I became a lightning rod. I hear you and I appreciate your response. And I think you highlight in your response a key critical point in communicating a transition to a shared services model, because whether or not I'm a lightning rod on this, in this particular show, I have to imagine that what I said is something that has been heard and will continue to be heard from those who become, service disenfranchised.
And by the way, I'm using faculty because the faculty administrator example is one that we can relate to.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's right in front of us. It's always right there.
I don't mean it easy like it's an easy thing to like. I mean it's people can relate to it. Right. So what I'm talking about here is this. By the way, this can apply to and should be applying to administrative functions in administrative areas.
Yes.
Right. And the whole idea behind this is finding a way to do a better job in the front end where the work's being done, but also as the data gets collected, that it's being done in a way that you have more accurate data the first or second time versus the fifth time, and you're able then to use that data more effectively. We are so inefficient in how we work. And I'll tell you something, and I'm going to say this, that part of what higher ed's going through too is trying to figure out the kind of person they should be hiring. So when there is a vacancy and you're looking for a new position to, maybe report to the dean or report to the head of a department, that skill set is very different from the skill set that it was 10 years ago. And the challenge today is for those still in those roles, how do they get the sufficient training to move to the next level? And all I can say is half the battle there is, are they willing to see themselves as a lifelong learner? Because if they're not, I can tell you that if you're not aware of it, other people are talking about you as somebody that's not willing to change. And part of what's going on right now in all of this change is, what are the kind of people should be working here? And I can tell you it's less about that you walk in with all the skill sets. It's that you have a desire to learn and you have a capacity to learn. And if you bring that to your job, I don't care what age you are, you will succeed in this environment. You may have outgrown your individual job, but there is a place for you if you have the capacity to learn and the desire to learn.
As we get into wrapping up here, how well do you think you can summarize this getting started approach to shared services and maybe offer a point that can help us move beyond just getting started? Where would you start to move into sort of brown belt ninja status?
Well, so interesting. The getting started idea is interesting because you talk to a school, they say they're just getting started when in fact they have shared services everywhere. But what they're really saying is we've done it every place that was just easy. Now we're trying to tackle the tough ones.
Right.
So whether you have never put a shared service on campus, or you've got a bunch, but they were easy because maybe they were the one-stop shopping kind of service and everybody bought into it. The first thing to do is to get people together to understand what we're talking about and what we're not talking about. And if the truth is the motivation behind this is not to downsize, you need to go out of your way and make that clear and show how you're going to do that if that's really the case. But getting the kind of working group and team together that is cross-functional, that represents the faculty, the students, and again, it depends on this kind of service center. But if you're doing a financial service center that does finance and HR functions, then you want representation of those that need to look at data, those that are affected by the change. And then once you bring them together, you share with them the different kinds of models that are out there. And there's all kinds of models, right? There's models where you've got one leader supporting multiple units. You've got one leader supporting one major unit. You've got one leader and mixed units. So when I say call it a unit, I mean a unit that might be outside of a division. And there's so much information out there now that demonstrates where schools have done this successfully and also where they haven't been successful. The next really exciting thing about this is to use it as the opportunity to look at your business practices. Really, this is not just about replacing one person with another person doing it. This is about saying, how should we do this function? How should we do travel reimbursement differently from a business practice so that it is more effective for all of us, the person at the front desk and the first person in the back office? And that process of looking at the business model or the business practices then leads to this idea of, well, how should we structure this? You create a plan for design, but you have a cross-functional team that's part of this. So as you can tell, since this is not there's very few things today you can do by mandate on a college campus. You can't. The executive vice president or the president could say, we're putting a service center in, and then that's in itself sufficient. The mandate has to be there, but then you got to bring a coalition together to then begin to understand what it means and then get them involved, and that takes time. So you have to be willing to recognize that this is not an overnight exercise, but you can start with the divisions or departments that have the greatest interest and maybe need. I mean, that's the ideal one. Greatest interest and openness and a need, and that's where you start, and then you build off of that.
Well, if you can't solve your shared services problems with that summary, I don't know how you're going to do it. How about that?
Well, you know what? I think what this does, because you're so kind to me. You love saying things like, yeah, that was really true. I solved the problem. And then half a second afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't solve anything. And what I did was I gave a framework for hopefully people to say, you know what? I've been thinking about doing this. I'm ready now to tackle something that I have not been willing to do yet. And sometimes all people need is a couple little tips to take that next step.
I think so. And I think if anything, this framework at least highlights, based on your experience, where the pitfalls are and where the fears are, because those fears, if we don't address them and talk about them, become irrational pretty fast. And in
really
fact,
fast.
There's a lot of opportunity here. And if we can frame it like that and communicate clearly and often, that I think certainly is what I have taken away from this conversation today.
You're one of my favorite faculty members. You know that?
You should come to one of my classes.
I'd love to.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Would you introduce me to some? Could I ask questions?
Of course not. No, we don't. No, that's good. Hey, thanks everybody for listening and joining us on the show. Make sure you head out and learn more about us, TeibelInc.com. We would love to hear from you how your shared services transition is going. Follow Howard on at Howard Teibel on Twitter. You should definitely follow him there for additional juicy insights from the field. Juicy.
God, promoter.
Back on the road, Howard. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks,
right.
everybody. We'll catch you next week on Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc.